city of Vienna, in 1893, some leading citizens were meeting to honor a fellow citizen, one of the world's greatest composers, Johannes Brahms. More than the man they knew, they were honoring his music, music that the world today continues to honor and love. They spoke of the ways in which Brahms' music reflected the Romantic movement. More important, they agreed that the composer's greatest contribution was to the classical movement in music. To honor Brahms, the outstanding classicist, these men commissioned a medal commemorating the composer's 60th birthday. Who was this composer, Johannes Brahms? What is the importance of his music? Like his music, the face of the composer suggests something of a massive strength of character, determination, sincerity. He was a reserved and, at times, a cruelly bitter man. But Brahms was also a man of good humor, of great kindness and affection. At the time of these photographs, he was being hailed as the foremost composer and champion of the classical, formal school of music. For a great controversy raged in the musical world, as reported in the newspapers of the day, between the emotional storytelling music of the Romanticists and the balanced, absolute music of the classicists. Followers of the Romantic school bitterly attacked Brahms, saying that he had set the art of composition back 100 years. Followers of the classical school, however, praised Brahms, comparing him with the immortal Beethoven. How had Brahms become the champion of classical music? Let's see. Born in a shabby tenement building in Hamburg on May 7, 1833, throughout most of his younger life, Johannes Brahms and his family lived in poor, drab surroundings. Years later, the mature Brahms might recall scenes of his childhood poverty and translate his emotions into poignant musical themes. The grim monotony of the tenements, the drab, colorless surroundings, probably depressed the sensitive, quiet child. More and more, he turned to reading. Classical literature fired his imagination. The depth and beauty of the Bible inspired him. These books shaped his thinking and the music he was to write. As a boy, Brahms spent many happy hours arranging toy soldiers in balanced classic designs. A love of classic design would be reflected later in his music. But much as he loved his toy soldiers, Johannes loved the piano more. Learning the fundamentals of music quickly as the years passed, Brahms became an accomplished pianist under the distinguished teacher Eduard Marxen. It was Marxen, the student of some of the great classical composers, who encouraged Brahms to write music. Brahms did compose youthful, melodic music of form and balance, music that was to be brought to the attention of the world by three men. The first was a Hungarian violinist named Raményi. Brahms and Raményi agreed to a concert tour. Raményi stimulated Brahms' interest in folk music. And for his violinist friend, Brahms arranged a group of folk melodies, the popular Hungarian dances. Playing these dances and other works, the youths traveled through the villages and hamlets of northern Germany. Reaching Hanover, Brahms met the second man who was to call public attention to his music, Joseph Joachim. Another Hungarian violinist, Joachim had many influential friends. He was so impressed with Brahms' musicianship that he wrote a letter introducing young Brahms to one of the great 19th century composers, Robert Schumann. Schumann and his wife Clara listened carefully as young Brahms played his music for them. The older composer was overwhelmed by the youth's talent. Schumann later wrote, "Many new and remarkable musical talents have made their appearance. There must, after such promise, suddenly appear one who should utter the highest ideal expression of his time. His name is Johannes Brahms." With these comments, Schumann was the third person to call public attention to Brahms. Many music critics agreed with him, acclaiming the design, the form, the wealth of melody, and the classical structure of Brahms' music. Other critics found Brahms' music cold and lifeless. Brahms ignored all critics. He busied himself directing vocal groups, playing concerts, and traveling. The beautiful German landscape constantly brought melodies into his mind, melodies that might later be worked into mature compositions, such as the somber, tragic overture. Arriving in Vienna in 1864, Brahms was to grow to musical maturity in this city, a city which was soon singing his many songs. Brahms had always been interested in vocal music and composed many works for chorus and solo voice. Perhaps Brahms' most familiar song is his Wiegenlied, the tender lullaby. Listen as it is sung with the original German lyrics. In the following years, Brahms became director of the Society of the Friends of Music in Vienna. But though he loved his work and this city, he still found musical inspiration traveling in Austria and Germany. On the small Isle of Rügen, amid scenes like this, the lonely, thoughtful Brahms completed a composition in one of the most expressive of musical forms, the Symphony. As a classical composer, Brahms feared a comparison between his first symphony and those of Beethoven, the great classical master. Back in Vienna, Brahms' first symphony was hailed by classicists as Beethoven's 10th Symphony. But the Romantics angrily jeered the composition as cold, hollow, and formal, and the composer as a man who resisted the main currents of new music. Again, Brahms ignored his critics, and in the village of Portschak-on-the-Sea, he wrote a second symphony. After hearing the composition, a friend wrote, "Your symphony is all rippling streams, blue sky, sunshine, and cool shadows. How beautiful it must be at Dvorak. In Dvorak, Brahms continued to compose music of classical form and design, music of warm, graceful melody. Here, he wrote two compositions which are recognized today as masterpieces, the Violin Concerto and the Second Piano Concerto. More and more, the music of Brahms was played and appreciated. Musical societies honored him. Universities offered him honorary degrees in recognition of his music. The music of a noble spirit. The music of a master designer. The music of a melodic genius. The music of Johannes Brahms. In 1897, at the age of 64, Brahms, now weak from a recurring illness, attended a performance of his Fourth Symphony. News of the composer's illness had spread through Vienna, and the people of the city, representing the people of the world, came to pay homage to the great composer. An extraordinary scene took place at the concert, one writer said. The applauding, shouting house, its gaze riveted on the figure standing in the balcony, so familiar and yet so strange, seemed unable to let him go. Brahms was overcome, and through the audience there was a feeling as of a stifled sob, for they knew they were saying farewell to the composer. Throughout his life, Brahms had been a lonely man, with few close friends, but now he found that his music had brought him the acclaim of the entire civilized world. As you listen to more of the music of Johannes Brahms, perhaps you will agree with the many who believe that it is expressive, classical music brought to new heights of perfection.